Jujutsu Kaisen's cast is deep and varied, full of personality, dynamism, and quality. You can list off the most central 10 to 15 characters, and you'd find that each is nearly as rich as the last, and more pertinently for this topic, each is different from the last, with a couple of contextually significant exceptions. But the core tenet that I think forms the bedrock of the majority of these character arcs is the following: how do I combat this world? How do I act, using my own power, to find happiness in this place that seems to promise none? The characters have often been affected by or seek to enact change in this society that is fundamentally broken and has formed their motivations in one way or another, and this leads to some tremendous character writing and thematic integration. How to change this world, or at least find some purpose within it. Kento concluded that he would not find any fulfillment, and as a result sought value through pulling it up from the roots. Toji became this haunting specter of rage, while others seek to prove society wrong through their actions. Others try to protect and nurture through systematic means. But no matter what the specifics are, a great number of characters in this cast have significant and big endeavors. But what if someone simple? Maybe even mundane? What can a character with no grand aspirations, with an aversion to the acts required to bring forth a world he desires, what can he do? This is the case of the humble, heartfelt Kento Nanami. And surprisingly, despite the desperately dark turn his journey takes and how seemingly insignificant his role seemed to him in the grand scheme of things, I believe he is one of the most hopeful characters in the narrative for what he represents. His character journey is one that does not hide at all from criticizing the setting. In fact, it is scathing in how it condemns it, but it still somehow lands on a point of idealism. Kento Nanami is serious, withdrawn, straightforward, and cutting in his honesty, getting straight to the heart of every matter in a way that reflects his no-nonsense, clear, and unbiased view of the world. He has a big preoccupation with compartmentalizing the time spent on work with the time spent on things he truly values, and at heart this helps show that the crux of Nanami is dripping in sentiment. He doesn't dislike the company of others, he's just quite blunt and raw in the way he communicates, which combines with his no-nonsense approach to make him seem unfriendly to the untrained eye. But at his core, Nanami is full of heart, and that is a big reason that he looks at the world the way he does, and we can see that in the minute details even before he makes it more obvious. He comes off as aloof and overly stern while being quite cynical about his profession, saying that being a jujutsu sorcerer is just a touch more worthwhile and a touch less foolish than being a salaryman. And he has more grounds to make that statement than the vast majority of characters in the setting, while also being sure to communicate that he is more suited to it. Essentially, Nanami is of the opinion due to his time at Jujutsu High that the sorcerer culture is completely broken and backwards. Similar to Kento, though not quite to the same extent, Nanami felt like sorcerers were dehumanized and used as tools for means that were ultimately reprehensible. The death of his partner Haibara was hugely influential in his ultimate attitude towards the profession and really nailed home the idea that sorcerers were largely self-sacrificial for no substantial reason, or at worst, for morally bankrupt reasons. Ultimately, all this caused him to run away from this life, despising it for all the pain and tragedy it leads to. But this was not a clean cut. He didn't find freedom here through his sojourns into other professions, and he was burdened by overwhelming pangs of guilt, regret, and frustration at his inability to save Haibara, among a few other scattered things. It all wore him down, leaving him weathered and scarred. In the end, Nanami is at heart an everyman. He is fantastic at what he does, but he really is just a man with a good heart who simply wants to make the world a marginally better place. Yet the state of the world eroded at his optimism from such a young age that he considers adulthood to be not a result of age, but of a slow, gradual, and relentless accumulation of reality. Of tragedy, frustration, sadness, cynicism, and ultimately, negativity. It is a sad but relatable way to think, made even more powerful by the context of his experiences. Similar to Kento again, Nanami became disillusioned with the profession due to realizing all of this. But more than that, he grew to hate and ideologically oppose it. And yet, What he came to realize was that in spite of everything, in this setting, it was worthwhile because it offered him the tiniest avenue to enact change. While his quote-unquote normal job didn't lead to the same torment, Nanami eventually came to realize that it also didn't offer any impact on the world, no positive change. But while Jujutsu sorcerers perpetuate a broken system, it is undeniable that in the process, they can genuinely save and help people. Nanami couldn't overthrow or dissipate the system by leaving, but he could make a positive impact by staying. And this is what he chose to do with the tiny bit of agency and power he had. Through coming back, Nanami felt the slightest bit of gratification from being able to gain an accumulation of gratitude from those who deserved to be helped. And this was enough to help him to live in a way that shook off his shame and regrets from the past. This is what he could do. He was cynical about the world, but that didn't mean he couldn't enact change. He hated the system, but he found a way to work towards his goal within it. This is played off as humorous initially, but he truly cannot respect those in the profession, including himself and close friends of his, for perpetuating this cycle. But nonetheless, it is the best answer he can come up with out of a series of awful ones. Not trying to revolutionize, but finding glimmers of value within this fragmented world. And it says something that if a regular guy like Nanami can find it, anyone can. And maybe widespread little bits of change similar to Nanami's could make a true, proper alteration. Now, a tiny wrinkle in this reasoning is that it could be argued that Nanami is not actually ordinary, in spite of what he thinks of himself. That no one who is able to look at the world in this way and still see solutions and hope despite what he's experienced is ordinary. But even if he isn't quite the everyman he sees himself as, his perseverance is a torch that can inspire others to act the same. And that can start a wave. He is weathered, and he is tired, but he isn't defeated, and he cannot help but represent this mundane sort of hope. Nanami wanted his life to have meaning, not in the sort of self-affirming, legacy-establishing kind of way, but in the sense that he wanted his time in the world to have a positive impact. And this is that impact. And in spite of the sorcerer culture being broken, he realized that it didn't mean it was bereft of value and put his reservations behind him for the sake of the end result: helping people. While he looked at the world cynically and hated a lot of it, considering that, he was glad to have been able to make little positive changes in people's lives. That was his salvation. And it was a struggle, but it was the right decision. His choice to make, his way to fight back. Not through wholesale revolution, but tiny, palpable changes that help others. Nanami is a man defined by the little things, of accumulation. The buildup of tiny negativities and tragedies caused true change and helped define him, making him into an adult. And using the experience he had, he realized that likewise, an accumulation of tiny positive changes in the world could carry true weight in the same way that negative ones do. It might not change the world on its own, but it is the first of potentially many dominoes. The opening ripple of a potential tsunami. The first embers of a torch. And that legacy was carried on by a certain young sorcerer. At first, Nanami was quite harsh on Yuji, partly because that's who he is, but also partly because he knew what becoming a sorcerer entailed. The weight and burden of it, the pain and sadness, the dehumanization that can occur. He didn't want Yuji's happiness eroded, his youth squandered, and left behind for the sake of his ideals. Even seeing the value of being a sorcerer, Nanami couldn't stomach this youth experiencing what he had, and so he tried to force him away from it. But Yuji's rise into prominence was inevitable through his conviction, and his relentless progress and resolve made Nanami realize that he was, in many ways, a kindred spirit. Perhaps a successor through what he represented. Just like Nanami, Yuji is hope, and while there may have been a lingering regret that someone so bright had put himself on this path, I don't think Nanami would feel as comfortable with the future of the world with any other character of this generation. In the face of despair, Nanami never stopped vying for change and heart and sentiment. As long as one perseveres and keeps trying, little impacts will accumulate. However, by his end, Nanami is exhausted, tired, and overwhelmed by it all. Had Mahito not been holding his life in his hands, I'm sure his willpower would have kept him pushing and pushing for as long as he could. But given his scenario in the middle of Shibuya's storm, Nanami is able to die satisfied, or at least something close to it. He dreams of the beautifully mundane, peaceful existence he could have had in another life, another time, another world. He lingers on his regrets for a moment, but is ultimately shown the next torchbearer by Haibara and concludes, with finality, that he has done enough. The distinction not being that he's admitting defeat, but that he's proud of the impact he has had, and that he has faith. Faith that Yuji has got it from here. Many thanks for watching.
あとは頼みます。